The night was silent except for the rustling of wind between the broken trees. The human soldier moved slowly, his boots pressing against the damp ground. His uniform was torn, his body tired, but his eyes stayed sharp. He had survived the battle when many others had not. Smoke still hung in the air, and faint red lights flickered in the distance where ships had burned. He kept his rifle close, though the weapon felt heavier with every step. Then, a sound cut through the silence. A low growl, not from any animal he knew, but something sharper, like metal scraping against stone. He froze and held his breath. His hand tightened around the rifle as his eyes searched the shadows. The sound came again, weak but threatening, from behind the remains of a fallen tree. He stepped closer, careful, each movement slow. The growl grew louder, mixed with a pained hiss. His eyes locked on the source. She was there, an alien girl. Her skin glimmered faintly under the broken moonlight, strange markings running across her arms. Her eyes were wild, glowing faint yellow, fixed on him with pure hatred. Blood ran down her side where a deep wound cut through her flesh. She tried to rise when she saw him, claws flashing in the dim light. Her movements were sharp, but her body shook from weakness. She pressed her back against the tree trunk, forcing herself upright. Every breath she took sounded like broken glass. The human did not move forward, not yet. He kept his rifle raised, but his finger did not pull the trigger. He studied her carefully. She looked fierce, like a predator, but the blood soaking her side told another story. She was dying. Her lips curled back, showing sharp teeth. A low snarl escaped her throat. Even hurt, she wanted to scare him away, but her arms trembled, and she almost fell again. She caught herself on the rough bark, her eyes never leaving his face. The soldier's heart pounded. His mind raced with choices. Walk away, finish her, or help. He swallowed hard, lowering his weapon slightly. His training told him she was dangerous, the enemy, but his instincts whispered something else. She was fighting pain more than him. He shifted the rifle onto his shoulder and raised his hands slowly, palms open to show he was not attacking. The alien girl blinked in confusion but quickly hissed again, dragging her claws against the ground, trying to warn him. The sound echoed, but it was weaker now. "You're hurt," he said softly, his voice steady but quiet. The alien tilted her head, not fully understanding the words, but she recognized the tone. Calm, careful, not hostile. He took one step closer. She growled again, her claws shaking in the air. Her body leaned forward as if ready to strike, but her wound pulled her back down. She winced, and for a moment her face twisted not in anger but in pain. The soldier stopped. He could see the blood dripping onto the dirt, forming dark stains. She was losing strength fast. He reached slowly for the pouch strapped to his belt, pulling out a small medical kit. He held it up for her to see. Her eyes narrowed. Her chest rose and fell quickly, her breathing ragged. She did not know what the box meant. She only knew this human stood too close. She bared her teeth again, her fierce image trembling with weakness. Still, he crouched low, setting the kit on the ground and pushing it forward. He stayed where he was, his hands lifted again, his eyes locked with hers, calm and steady. The silence stretched long. Finally, her claws lowered slightly, just slightly, as if her body no longer had the strength to keep them raised. Her breathing grew slower, heavier. She leaned against the tree, her eyes still fixed on him, but the wildfire inside them softened for a moment. The human waited. His heartbeat slowed as he kept his hands open, showing no threat. The alien closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again, blinking hard as if fighting to stay awake. She looked at the kit on the ground. Her fingers twitched. He saw her weakness, but he also saw her pride. She did not want to accept help from him, yet her body betrayed her. She could not stand much longer. The soldier reached slowly, picking up the kit again. He moved forward a little more. She growled faintly, but it sounded broken, more breath than voice. Her claws lifted half an inch, then dropped again. Her strength was slipping away. When he stopped just a few feet away, he knelt carefully, close enough to hear her labored breaths. She looked into his eyes, and for the first time there was something new. Not trust, not yet, but a flicker of hesitation. The soldier spoke again, his words low and steady. "I can stop the bleeding. If I don't, you will die." The alien stared at him, silent, her chest rising and falling. A thin stream of blood slid from her wound, dripping onto her hand. She looked at it, then back at him. Her body shook once, Then she let her head rest against the tree. Her claws lowered completely, scraping the dirt with no strength left to lift them. The soldier took a slow breath. He opened the kit, pulling out a bandage and antiseptic. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from the weight of the choice he had made. He leaned closer, ready to touch her wound. Her eyes closed, not fully asleep, but too tired to fight anymore. Her breathing remained heavy. For now, she would not stop him. The soldier reached out, the first moment of fragile trust forming between them in the shadow of a broken battlefield. The soldier's hand hovered over the alien girl's wound, his fingers shaking only slightly before they pressed the bandage against her bleeding side. She hissed in pain, her claws flashing up so close that he could feel the air shift near his throat. His pulse raced, but he did not pull away. Her eyes blazed with fury, yet behind that fury was weakness. The bandage darkened with blood quickly, but he pressed harder, holding it steady. Her breath came out in short gasps, each one sounding like it might be her last. The soldier spoke softly, almost whispering, "Stay still. If you move, you'll bleed out." She didn't understand all the words, but the tone reached her. Her claws trembled above his chest, then fell slowly back to the dirt. She leaned back against the tree, her body shaking, but she let him continue. He cleaned the wound as best as he could. The liquid burned, and she snarled again, almost biting at him, but her strength wasn't enough. Her eyes glared into his, fierce but fading. For a second, she looked like she might cry out, then bit it back with sharp teeth grinding together. He noticed her pride. Even in agony, she refused to scream. He worked quickly, wrapping the cloth tight, knotting it against her ribs. She flinched every time the bandage tightened. He half expected her to strike him, yet she stayed still, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The moment the bandage was done, she sagged against the trunk, her eyes fluttering. The soldier sat back slightly, breathing hard. His rifle lay on the ground within her reach, but she made no move for it. Instead, she tilted her head, eyes narrowing as if studying him. Her lips parted, and a strange sound escaped, half snarl, half word in her own tongue. He did not know what it meant, but it didn't sound like a threat. Night grew colder, and mist rolled low across the ground. He pulled off the torn cloth from his shoulder and placed it gently over her. She grabbed it weakly with her clawed hand, staring at the fabric, then at him. The fire in her eyes dimmed, replaced with confusion. Why would an enemy give warmth? Her pride fought the gesture. She wanted to spit it away, to throw it aside, but her fingers held the cloth tighter. She was trembling, not only from the cold, but from the strange feeling creeping into her chest. Something unfamiliar. Something dangerous. The soldier sat nearby, not too close, but close enough to watch her. His body leaned forward slightly, his head resting on his knees. He was exhausted, but he kept his eyes open, ready in case she changed her mind and decided to finish him while he slept. Yet she did not move. Instead, she lowered her head onto the bark of the tree, her eyes heavy. She kept glancing at him, suspicious, cautious, but softer now. The night passed with the sound of her slow, ragged breathing mixing with the wind. At one point, her clawed hand twitched toward her wound, then stopped, her gaze catching his steady face. For the first time, she did not see only an enemy. She saw someone who could have left her to die, but chose not to. That thought gnawed at her, unsettling her more than the wound itself. Her sharp nature cracked just a little under the weight of survival and his quiet presence. She finally let her eyes close, not fully asleep, but surrendering to the moment. The soldier, watching the rise and fall of her chest, allowed his hand to relax against his side. Neither trusted the other fully, but the battlefield had forced them into this fragile silence. And in that silence, something shifted, small, almost invisible, but real enough to change everything that would come next. The first light of dawn slipped through the broken branches, painting the ground in pale silver. The soldier woke with stiff muscles, his hands still resting near his rifle. His eyes moved instantly to her. The alien girl was awake already, leaning against the tree, her glowing eyes fixed on him. Her face was pale, her breathing uneven, but the bandage held. Blood no longer flowed freely, though the cloth was dark and heavy with it. When he shifted closer, she hissed, her claws flashing instinctively. But the motion lacked force. He stopped, raising his hand to show calm. She stared at him as if weighing every move, her pride fighting against the weakness that chained her body. He reached into the kit again, pulling out another strip of cloth. Her eyes followed every motion. She bared her teeth in warning, but he ignored it, dipping the cloth into a small bottle of antiseptic. The moment he pressed it to her wound, she stiffened, her body jerking as if lightning struck her. A harsh cry tore from her throat before she clenched her jaw shut, forcing silence over her pain. He felt the vibration of her growl under his fingers as he held the bandage firm. Her claws rose, trembling inches from his face. For one terrifying second, he thought she would slice his throat open. But instead, her arm dropped again, scraping weakly against the dirt. Her pride was cracking, but not broken. He spoke softly, though he knew she might not understand. "It burns now, but it will stop the infection." His words were like stones dropped into a deep lake. She did not catch their meaning, but the sound carried a strange calm. She narrowed her eyes, confused, suspicious, but she did not strike. Her chest heaved as she breathed through the pain. Sweat glistened on her brow, her jaw tight as she fought not to cry out. He worked quickly, wrapping the wound tighter, knotting the cloth with steady hands. The moment it was done, she slumped against the tree, her shoulders trembling. Her eyes closed, but her lips moved as if whispering to herself in her own tongue. The soldier sat back, wiping blood from his fingers. He looked at her carefully, not just at the claws, the teeth, or the sharp markings on her skin. He saw something else, fear. She tried to mask it with fierceness, but it was there, buried under layers of instinct. Her eyes opened again, meeting his. The hatred in them had softened, just a fraction, replaced by something harder to read. She tilted her head, almost as if curious. Her hand moved slightly, brushing against the edge of the bandage. For the first time, she did not pull away from his touch. The morning wind carried the faint scent of smoke from the battlefield far behind them. Birds cried out in the distance, but around them, the forest was quiet. In that silence, she studied him closely, as though searching for a hidden trick. She expected cruelty, expected betrayal, yet all she found was steady patience. Her claws curled into the dirt, but not in threat. They dug softly, nervously, as if she did not know what else to do. Her chest rose and fell slower now, her breaths less sharp, her body finally settling under the pressure of care she had never expected. He leaned back against a rock, exhaustion pulling at him. His eyes stayed on her, but his shoulders loosened. She watched him for a long while, her fierce stare slowly shifting. Her lips pressed together, and for the briefest second, her gaze dropped. Not in defeat, but in something close to acceptance. The girl who had been a feral beast hours before now sat silently, her claws resting in the dirt, her wound bound by the hands of her enemy. Something had begun to change, though neither of them yet understood what it truly meant. Darkness settled again as the fire crackled softly between them. The soldier fed it with broken branches, careful not to draw too much smoke. Across the small flames, the alien girl sat with her knees drawn close, the cloth from his shoulder wrapped tightly around her like a shield she did not want to admit she needed. Her glowing eyes reflected the firelight, sharp and watchful, but no longer burning with the same wild rage. He glanced at her, then back at the fire. The silence between them was heavy, filled with unspoken tension. She shifted slightly, her claws tapping against the dirt, not as a threat this time, but as if restless. Finally, her voice broke the quiet. The words were halting, her accent thick but clear enough to understand. "Why? Help me. Human enemy." His head lifted, and for a moment he just looked at her, surprised she had spoken at all. Her tone was sharp, demanding, but under it lay confusion, almost like fear. He stirred the fire, then said quietly, "Because you were bleeding. Because no one deserves to die like that." She tilted her head, her glowing eyes narrowing, trying to make sense of his words. Her people had taught her humans were weak, selfish, brutal. Yet this one had carried her wound, given her warmth, and now sat close without chains, without a weapon aimed at her. Her voice dropped lower, barely above a whisper, almost as if speaking to herself. "We are not the same." He met her gaze through the fire, his eyes steady. "Pain doesn't care who you are. Neither does kindness." The fire popped, a spark flying upward. She flinched, then glanced back at him. For a brief second, her expression changed, softer, uncertain, as though the weight of his words pressed against the wall she had built inside herself. She looked down, her clawed hands curling into her lap. He pulled his blanket tighter around his shoulders and leaned back, exhaustion settling into his bones. She watched the motion closely. Something stirred in her chest, a feeling she could not name. The soldier had lowered his guard even when she could have ended him with one swipe of her claws. Instead of attacking, she found herself staring at the way his face looked in the firelight, tired, scarred, but calm. The alien girl shifted again, her body leaning just slightly closer to the warmth of the fire he had made. Her eyes flicked to him, suspicious of herself more than him, as if catching her own betrayal. For the first time, the fierceness in her posture broke. She sat smaller, quieter, not like a predator, but like someone who had forgotten how to rest. Neither spoke again, but the silence had changed. It was no longer a wall keeping them apart. It was something fragile, stretching between them, holding the shape of a strange and dangerous trust. The morning sun pushed through the mist, painting the forest in pale gold. The soldier adjusted his pack and then crouched beside her. She tried to stand on her own, her claws digging into the bark of the tree, but her legs trembled and gave out beneath her. She fell back hard, a frustrated snarl escaping her lips. Her pride burned hotter than the wound. He said nothing. Instead, he bent down and slid his arms beneath her before she could protest. She struggled, her claws brushing his shoulder, but he lifted her easily, settling her against his back. She hissed once, but the sound died in her throat when she realized how steady his steps were. Each movement was careful, balanced, as though he had carried weight like this many times before. Her breath warmed the side of his neck. At first, she kept her body stiff, refusing to relax against him. But the steady rhythm of his stride, the firmness of his grip, slowly wore down her resistance. Her head brushed against his shoulder when she lost the strength to hold it upright. The forest whispered around them, leaves rustling, birds darting between the branches. He moved silently, except for the crunch of his boots against the soil. She listened to the sound, steady and unshaken, and found herself breathing in time with it. Every few steps, her claws twitched as though she wanted to push away, but they never left his shoulder. Her thoughts tangled with confusion. This was the same human she had sworn to hate, the same species she'd been told was weak, fragile, unworthy. Yet here he was, carrying her weight without complaint, his muscles straining but never faltering. She had seen warriors of her own kind leave their wounded behind, yet this man carried her as if she mattered. She let her eyes close for a moment, listening to his heartbeat close to her ear. It was steady, unafraid. Something strange stirred in her chest, something that frightened her more than any battlefield ever had. Her claws loosened, no longer ready to strike, and instead they rested lightly against the fabric of his torn uniform. The soldier felt the shift in her body. She was no longer tense, no longer fighting against his hold. A small breath escaped his lips, almost relief. He tightened his grip slightly, as if promising silently he would not let her fall. Hours passed under the cover of trees, and by the time he finally set her down to rest, she looked at him differently. Her fierce glare had dulled, replaced by something unsettled, something soft she did not want to admit. Her voice came low, uncertain, almost against her will. "Why? Carry me?" He met her eyes, his own calm, his tone simple. "Because you can't walk, and because leaving you is not an option." Her heart stuttered at the words. No one had ever said such a thing to her. She lowered her gaze quickly, her pride still alive, but her body betrayed her, leaning slightly toward him instead of away. The fierce predator she had been seemed to fade, if only for that moment, into something gentler, something closer to a lost, fragile creature that had finally found a place to rest. The quiet of the forest shattered when a sharp whistle cut through the air. The soldier froze, his instincts flaring. The alien girl stiffened on his back, her claws digging into his shoulder as her eyes widened with dread. From between the trees, shadows moved, figures in dark armor, her own kind. Their weapons glinted in the light, aimed directly at them. "Traitor!" one of them snarled in their guttural tongue, his voice echoing across the clearing. Another stepped forward, pointing a spear toward her. "You lie with the human? You shame us." The girl's breath hitched, her wound throbbing, but her pride surged hot in her chest. She tried to push away from him, to stand on her own, but her body betrayed her again. The soldier lowered her gently, stepping in front of her with his rifle raised. His voice was low, steady, but filled with iron. "You'll have to get through me first." Laughter rippled through the group of armored hunters. To them, one wounded girl and a single human were nothing. They charged, blades flashing. The soldier's rifle barked fire, the recoil thundering against his shoulder. One enemy fell, then another, but more closed in. The forest erupted with screams, smoke, and steel. The girl tried to rise, her claws dragging across the dirt. Every breath burned, every movement felt like knives, but she could not just watch. One of the hunters broke past the soldier's guard, weapon raised to strike him down. With a snarl that tore from deep within her chest, she launched forward, her claws slicing across the attacker's throat. Blood sprayed, and she collapsed, gasping, but her eyes burned with defiance. The soldier turned, stunned by her sudden strength. He shot the next enemy before the blade could fall on her. The two of them moved as one, his rifle cracking, her claws flashing when his guard was broken. The fight dragged on, brutal and desperate. The soldier's arm ached, his vision blurred with sweat, but he refused to step back. Every time he faltered, he felt her presence at his side, her snarls filling the air, her claws striking where he could not. At last, the final pursuer fell into the dirt, his armor shattered. The clearing fell silent again, except for the sound of ragged breaths. Smoke rose from the rifle's barrel as the soldier lowered it slowly. He turned to her. She was on her knees, swaying, blood dripping from fresh cuts, but her head was high, her eyes blazing not with hatred but with something fierce and protective. "You fought for me," he said, disbelief in his voice. Her lips curled into a weak, trembling snarl. "No, I fought with you." She collapsed then, but before the ground could claim her, his arms caught her. He held her close, her blood staining his uniform, her claws resting lightly against his chest. The hunters had called her a traitor, but in that moment, she no longer cared. Something had shifted forever, something no battlefield could erase. The battlefield was silent now, littered with broken weapons and the bodies of her pursuers. Smoke drifted through the clearing, carrying the bitter scent of blood and ash. The soldier knelt with her cradled in his arms, her body trembling, her breath shallow but steady, her claws no longer lifted in warning, instead resting weakly against his chest. Her eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly in the fading light. She looked up at him, her gaze softer than it had ever been. Once, those eyes had been sharp enough to cut through steel, filled with fury and pride. Now they shimmered with something fragile, something she did not know how to name. "You should have left me," she whispered, her voice rough and broken. The words carried no anger, only exhaustion. He shook his head, his jaw set with quiet resolve. "I don't leave people behind. Not even you." Her lips trembled. She had been feared all her life, called a beast, a weapon, a monster. Yet this man had carried her, fought for her, bled beside her. She stared at his face, at the scars and tired eyes, and for the first time she let herself believe someone might see her as more than a creature of war. Her claws curled weakly into his torn uniform, not in threat, but in need. Her voice came again, softer this time, almost like a plea. "Why treat me like this?" He brushed the blood from her cheek with the back of his hand. His answer was simple, steady, as if it had always been there. "Because you deserve more than pain." Her chest tightened at the words. A warmth spread through her body, stronger than the ache of her wounds. The fierceness that once defined her began to crumble. She no longer looked like the predator who had snarled at him in the shadows. She looked small, almost fragile, her pride giving way to something new. Tears she did not understand stung her eyes. She lowered her head against him, her voice breaking into a whisper only he could hear. "Then, let me stay, not as your enemy." He tightened his hold on her, his arms firm as if making an unspoken vow. The firelight from their camp flickered behind them, warm against the cold night. For the first time she allowed herself to close her eyes, not out of weakness, but trust. The fierce alien girl who once bared her teeth at every shadow now rested like a gentle kitten in the arms of the human who had healed her. And in that fragile peace, both of them knew nothing would ever be the same again.